Hello, and welcome to the C3 Method Podcast with your host, Robert Polenic. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. Today's podcast number 2269, and the title is When Eating Less Won't Help Fat Loss. We do typically think of the goal of fat loss being combined with eating less. However, what I want to do today is to share an example where eating less wasn't going to be what the person needed to do. They were already eating too much less. So we're going to go ahead and clear that up a little bit. This client, they're a new client for me. They were struggling to lose weight, and they were wanting to specifically lose body fat and weight. Their goal, they knew that if they wanted to lose weight, that it would be better for that to come from body fat than obviously from losing muscle mass. So they wanted to specifically weigh less, and then secondarily, they knew the less should come from body fat. This is a little bit different because most people, they want to lose body fat, and secondarily, that means they'll weigh less. So this is a little bit of a flip on that script. And the reason why is they are a competitive runner. They do lift weights, but it's actually just to support their running. And their performance had been decreasing. Their running coach suggested that they actually lose weight in order to help their performance. They are, she's a female, she's 5'10", 145 pounds, and she had a recent DEXA scan done that showed she was 17% body fat. 17% body fat for a female is actually very lean. That's already very lean. 5'10", 145 pounds, for her style of running is a marathon. Her goal is to break a 4-hour marathon, which is very good. I mean, I would say that's upper intermediate into advanced, being able to break 4 hours. And she's run many marathons before, and she's brought her time down over time. She's made some improvements, but she seems to be stuck at a plateau. And that's whenever the running coach suggested that she aim to weigh less. Now, the fact that she's already under 20% means she's already very lean, and 145 pounds isn't necessarily, heavy for marathon runners, especially for a female at 5'10". So my normal kind of approach would be let's look at some other factors first before we try to just make this person weigh less when they're already on the a lean physique, they're already an athletic build. What else, what other options could there be? So I do have a running coach certification. I am familiar with running, and I coach a lot of people for marathons, ultra marathons, Ironmans, and all the other chaos and craziness that endurance athletes get into. So I'm very familiar with it. And being 5'10", female, 145, 17% body fat, I would be surprised if weighing less was worth the effort, in the sense of they would start to then risk losing muscle tissue, risk losing strength, and both of those are going to impact performance and also just longevity. So in my mind, I'm like, there's a lot of things we would look at before we would think about trying to weigh less. Their current running coach is not, doesn't have any nutrition background. So that is the enormously large gap that we would want to focus on before we would try to weigh less. So this person basically, on that advice they got from their coach, which was weigh less, that was all they told them. And then they said, how should I eat? Da 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 da. And the coach was basically, you're eating less will help. You clearly are eating too much because you're too heavy. And it's like, oh my God, they're 17% body fat, 145 pounds, and 5'10", too heavy bullshit, kind of stuff. So it gets me all fired up because this coach is basically messing up this person's emotional and mental health, and just doesn't have the knowledge to even be giving this type of advice. So fires me up, gets me frustrated. So I asked her what her current nutrition approach was. By the way, they did not have any established pre-run routine for the days leading into the run. And then what they ate during the run was very kind of by the book basic. It didn't have any personalization to it. And that was the only thing they were really following nutrition-wise. He wasn't given any kind of nutrition program to follow on a regular basis. So she wakes up at 5 in the morning. She has some fruit and a gel pouch. And she said that puts her around 50 grams of carbs, maybe a little bit more. She then goes and does her runs. Then when she gets back, she has a fruit and protein powder smoothie, like a shake. She'll then go to work for 4 or 5 hours, have lunch. Her lunch is a protein source with vegetables. And then she does her afternoon work. And then dinner is with the family, so it's a protein, carb, and vegetable. So some type of usually meat. Carb would be like rice, potatoes, pasta, that kind of stuff. And then they throw in some vegetables as well. She'll then have a relaxing evening with her spouse. And then before bed, she started taking relatively recently a collagen and casein protein powder mix with some glutamine that she has found that has helped her recovery. So she's feeling like crap and her performance is going down, but that was a change she made, I think she said about like 6 weeks ago, and that helped her at that time feel better. Like it gave her a boost in recovery, but yet things are still kind of decreasing and going down. So everything is kind of getting worse and she doesn't know what to do. Her total calorie intake is only around 1,500 to 1,700 calories, which is not good given her body weight and how active she is. That is so, like way underfed. And her protein is around 120 grams, which again, reference, she weighs 145. And she believes that possibly she's eating too much protein and maybe those extra calories are contributing to why she's not losing weight. And that is not true. We'll unpack that like another time. So she came to me asking for help because one of her friends in her running group is a client of mine. And that friend has been improving her performance. She's been doing really well. And they started talking about what they were eating. And my client eats between 2,000 to 2,400 calories every day. So this friend was like, well, what the hell? You know, you're eating more than I used to eat. Your performance is getting better, but you look good, like body composition wise, and your weight doesn't seem to be a problem for you. What are you doing? And that's why she decided to reach out to me, and that's why we're working together now. So in this case, for this client, eating less isn't going to help. She's already eating too much less. So we have to eat better. And this is actually quite often the case for many people who pursue weight loss and fat loss by eating less. They tend to eat too much less. I know I'm using a really weird terminology there, but I kind of like it. So they eat less, they see maybe some progress, or they don't see enough progress, and then they eat less even more, so they increase the deficit, and then they get a little bit of a boost, maybe not, maybe a little bit, so then they eat even less, so they continue to eat less and less and less and less, but eventually that kind of plateaus. They feel like absolute crap. Nothing is changing in their body weight, and everything is just getting worse and worse and worse. So eating less doesn't seem to be helping. They then wonder, what in the hell else should I do? If eating less isn't helping me lose weight, what other options do I have? And this is what I wanted to cover in today's podcast, because that's exactly what I'm doing with this client. Is in the pursuit of fat loss, people often over-restrict their foods. And then they combine that with mistiming their food intake. So an example with this client is they're most active in the beginning of the day and midday, but they're having the most of their calories at the end of the day. So the calorie demand timing is mismatched to the calorie intake timing. This leads to poor body composition. So at the same weight, they will have more fat, less muscle mass. They're also going to have poor workout performance because they're not fueling the workout properly. And they're going to have overall poor results because the adaptation abilities of the body, the ability for the body to adapt to the stimulus that they're putting on it, is decreased and lessened. It's not optimized. So they look like crap, they feel like crap, and the results are crap. Not a great place to be, right? That's not what we want. So what do we do when we find ourselves in that position? Is I've eaten as less as I can. I can't eat more or less because I feel like crap, everything's going to crap, and it just doesn't seem to be working. So how in the hell is less even going to happen anymore? I'm starting to get major cravings. I feel like miserable all day. Less can't possibly be the option. What do I do? The first place I have people start is we go to calculator.net and we use a BMR calculator. BMR stands for basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories you need just to sustain your organs and stay alive. It doesn't even count for like activity, daily activity. If you were to lay in bed with your eyes closed, that's how many calories you need to be alive. That's your BMR. So we use a BMR calculator to find out what our BMR is. That would be, in kind of terminology, that's the floor. That's as low as we would go. Then, based on the person's activity level, that BMR calculator will show you if you have a sedentary lifestyle, if you exercise 2 or 3 times a week, or 4 or 5 times a week, or you have vigorous exercise 6 to 7 times a week, how many calories you would need to maintain your weight. So let's say, for example, this person's BMR is 1,500 calories. But based on their activity level, their maintenance weight, their maintenance calories, is around 2,400. So their BMR is 1,500, their maintenance calories is 2,400. That then we would consider to be the range that we would want to be in. So you use the BMR as the bottom, you use the maintenance calories that matches your activity level as the top. So that now has a range for calories. What you want to do is eat within that range. On days you're active, eat on the higher end of that range. On days you're less active, eat on the lower end of that range. And that'll give you an idea of how much is too much less and how much is maybe just too much to where you're not in enough of a deficit to promote fat loss. So that gives you a range to be in. Then we want to have our protein around 0.6 grams per pound of body weight as a minimum. And you can eat above that, especially if you lift weights. I usually would give a range of 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, but very rarely do I ever actually recommend 0.6. I usually recommend people go higher. And part of that is because if they have any kind of regular activity, regular type of exercise, they're going to have an increased protein demand for recovery and repair. And then also, the more protein we eat in our diet, it helps us feel more satiated at our meals. We feel fuller between meals, and that can decrease our cravings and our hunger to eat more carbs and fats, which directly can correlate when in excess to body fat. Whereas protein in excess, it's really actually hard to eat an excess amount of protein. Our body tends to just use it for different things. It helps to grow our hair, our skin, our nails, balance the pH in our blood, regulate body temperature, repair and kind of fix damaged cells, including muscle cells. It does a lot of stuff. So our body tends to use protein even up to like 1 gram per pound of body weight. And for very active people with weight training, they might be able to go up to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, or even higher if they're taking, exogenous hormone support. Maybe they'll go even above that, depending on the intensity and the volume of their weight training. So protein is something that helps us feel more satiated. It doesn't get converted to body fat, so we can lean a little bit harder into that, eat a little bit higher in the range, and that actually helps our fat loss process. And then for timing, so we now know kind of the idea of where our calories should be. We know where our protein should be. Timing or distribution of the calories and protein is the next thing we look at. The first stage that I have people go to is what I call thirds distribution. If we think of our awake time of the day, we usually sleep for 6 to 8 hours. That means we're awake for 16 to 18 hours. If I divide that into 3 sections, I roughly have 3 sections of 5 to 6 hours. So you have the first 5 to 6 hours of being awake, the middle 5 to 6 hours of being awake, and then the final whatever hours of being awake. We want to divide our calories and protein into those thirds. So the first 1/3 of the day, I want to have 1/3 of my calories and protein. In the second third of my day, I want to have 1/3 of my calories and protein. In the final third of my day, I want to have the final third of my calories and protein. That distribution now better matches our intake versus our output. It improves body composition, improves daily energy, daily mood. It'll definitely improve performance, adaptation, and recovery. And then we can get more advanced to where we do eventually eat more around the most active third of the day, and then the less amount at the least active time. But starting with thirds distribution is a great place to start. This gives us a structure that we now can know we're eating sufficient amount of calories to maintain performance and general mood and energy and health, but not too much to where we're not getting the goal of fat loss. Then we know the protein, so we feel more satiated during our meals. We have better recovery from our workouts, and overall we just have a better body composition. And then we know our timing component, because that helps all this stuff process as well. So we get, again, better daily energy, better daily mood, better performance, better stimulus out of our workouts, better adaptation to our workouts. Everything gets better. So that is what we want to start with. That is by far the biggest things everybody wants to tackle. Tackle all that before you do anything else. Those are the big things. Then we would look at if somebody's worried about, well, what's percentage of carbs versus fat should I have? That's more experiential, and that's case-by-case basis. But in general, having carbs before your most active times tends to be best for most people. And then having a mix of carbs and fats, or leaning more heavily into fats in your less active times, tends to be better for most people. And that's because carbs digest very quickly, therefore they're available very quickly when we're energetic and moving. And then fats digest slower, so that way it's a nice slow release of energy, and that better matches a more sedentary moment of our day. This approach leads to better body composition, better energy for workouts, increased performance, which then increases the stimulus for change from our workouts. It increases our ability to adapt to that stimulus, and then overall, we get much better progress. We get much better results, and we feel better along the way. If eating less doesn't seem to be working, this is what we do. We eat better. We make sure our calories are sufficient, but still in the deficit that we need. We make sure our protein is sufficient. Then we make sure our distribution better matches our usage. When we eat our calories, better matches as to when we use our calories. And from there, you're just going to be as active as you can be and be patient. Changes will come, body composition change will happen, and you will start to see and make the progress that you've been looking for. So when eating less won't help fat loss, this is the approach that we use. If you want any help with this, I do help people with one-on-one nutrition and training coaching, or just nutrition alone. You can learn about our services at c3method.com. The 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. And you can always email me from the website, or just c3method@gmail.com. Let me know you're interested. We'll set up a consultation, talk about what your struggles are, what you're currently doing, and then I can give you some recommendations for what the approach would be that would be best for you. Awesome. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people that know about the podcast, the more people could be helped by the podcast. If you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name C3 Method. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.